In the cold rain of Cleveland, a desperate 10-year-old girl crashes a billionaire's exclusive auction, clutching an empty milk bottle and making a promise that will change lives forever. "I swear I'll pay you back when I grow up." But what begins as a seemingly simple act of childhood desperation quickly unravels into something far darker. Why does this homeless child wear a pendant identical to one worn by the billionaire's daughter, who supposedly died in a fire 20 years ago? What secrets do her silent brother's disturbing drawings reveal about that tragic night? And most chilling of all, could the billionaire's perfect, beautiful wife be harboring a 20-year secret so monstrous it threatens everyone in its shadow? Prepare for a story where nothing is as it seems, where every revelation leads to another shocking twist, and where the desperate plea of a child exposes a web of lies that will leave you questioning everything until the final moment. Follow our channel for more unforgettable stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Like and comment to let us know where you're watching from. The rain fell softly that cold night in Cleveland, Ohio. It was the kind of rain that didn't pour but persisted, seeping into your bones if you stayed out too long. Wind cut through the industrial district like invisible blades, whistling between abandoned warehouses and empty loading docks. The only sounds of life came from inside Warehouse 34, where amber light spilled from covered windows, and luxury vehicles lined the otherwise desolate street. Inside, crystal glasses clinked gently against each other as servers in crisp black uniforms weaved through tables of the city's elite. This wasn't just any gathering, it was the annual Hallberg silent auction, where artifacts worth millions changed hands with nothing more than a nod or the subtle raise of a finger. Rare paintings, ancient sculptures, and historical documents were displayed under perfect lighting, each with a minimum bid that could buy a modest home. The massive industrial space had been transformed. Crystal chandeliers hung from exposed beams, their light reflecting off polished concrete floors. White orchids adorned every table, their delicate petals a stark contrast to the rough brick walls. The warehouse's past life as a storage facility for steel had been erased, replaced by the gentle hum of wealth and privilege. At exactly 8 p.m., gold watches around the room displayed the time in perfect synchronicity. Martin Hallberg, the evening's host and one of Wall Street's most notorious billionaires, stepped onto a small platform. His tailored black suit seemed to absorb the light around him. At 62, his silver hair was still thick, styled immaculately, and his steel blue eyes surveyed the room with a practiced detachment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice low and controlled. "Welcome to the 34th annual." The massive metal door at the entrance groaned suddenly, the sound echoing through the space like a wounded animal. Every head turned. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. A small figure stood silhouetted against the night. Rain dripped from her clothes, forming a tiny puddle around bare feet caked with mud. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, her thin frame dwarfed by the imposing doorway. Security personnel moved immediately, but something about the girl, perhaps the determined set of her shoulders or the unnatural stillness with which she stood, made them hesitate just long enough for her to bolt forward. She ran down the center aisle between tables of stunned billionaires, her wet footprints marking a path across the polished floor. Her hair, dark and matted, clung to her face. Her clothes, a faded pink sweatshirt and torn jeans, were spotted with mud and what looked disturbingly like dried blood. The girl slowed only when she reached the platform where Martin stood. She looked up at him, her green eyes wide and unblinking, tear tracks cutting clean lines through the dirt on her face. "That's close enough," a security guard warned, reaching for her shoulder. Martin raised his hand slightly and the guard froze. Something in the billionaire's expression had changed. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Those who knew him well, and few did, might have recognized the minute shift in his always controlled demeanor. The girl reached into her sweatshirt pocket and pulled out an empty glass bottle. It was an ordinary milk bottle, the kind you might find in any grocery store. She held it up like an offering, her small hands trembling visibly. "Please, sir." Her voice cracked, barely audible over the uncomfortable shifting of the crowd. "I need milk for my brother." Tears welled in her eyes but didn't fall. "I swear I'll pay you back when I grow up." A ripple of uncomfortable laughter moved through the crowd. Someone whispered about calling child services. Another suggested removing the little vagrant immediately. A woman in diamonds worth millions pressed a perfumed handkerchief to her nose as if the child carried some contagion. But Martin Halberg didn't laugh. He didn't move. He didn't even seem to breathe. His eyes, always described in business magazines as impenetrable or calculating, had widened slightly. He stared not at the girl's face but at something around her neck, a necklace with an antique blue flower pendant, partially hidden beneath her sweatshirt. The security team waited for his signal, hands hovering near their earpieces. The room held its collective breath, the awkwardness of the moment stretching like a thread about to snap. "Sir?" the guard prompted quietly. Martin's expression darkened. His gaze moved from the pendant to the girl's face, studying her features with an intensity that made several guests shift uncomfortably in their seats. Something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, or something deeper. Because that blue flower pendant wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was identical to the one his daughter Emily had worn the day of the orphanage fire, 20 years ago to the day. The fire that had claimed her life, along with 12 other children. Or so he had been told. "Everyone out," Martin said suddenly, his voice like gravel. When no one moved, he turned to face the crowd, his expression thunderous. "Now!" The girl flinched but didn't run. She stood her ground, the empty bottle still clutched in her small hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. As guests began reluctantly gathering their belongings, murmuring in confusion and displeasure, Martin knelt slowly until he was eye level with the child. His movement was stiff, mechanical, as if his body was acting against his mind's better judgment. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Zoe," she whispered, her voice steadier now. "My brother is really hungry, mister. He's just a baby. He needs milk." Martin's gaze returned to the pendant. "Where did you get that necklace, Zoe?" The girl's hand instinctively reached up to touch it, her eyes suddenly wary. "It's mine," she said defensively. "My mom gave it to me before." She didn't finish the sentence. Outside, thunder rolled across the Cleveland sky, as if punctuating her unspoken words. Martin reached into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone. Without taking his eyes off the girl, he pressed a single button. "Jackson," he said when someone answered. "Prepare the car and call Dr. Winters. Tell her it's an emergency." He paused. "And stop at a store. Buy milk. All types." He ended the call and stood slowly, towering over the child again. His face had returned to its usual mask of calm control, but something in his eyes had changed, a spark of something that hadn't been there in 20 years. "I believe you have a story to tell me, young lady," he said, offering his hand to the girl. "About that necklace, about your brother, and about why, of all the places in Cleveland, you chose to interrupt my auction tonight." Zoe hesitated, looking at his outstretched hand as if it might be a trap. Then slowly she placed her small, dirty hand in his clean, manicured one. "I just need milk," she said simply. "I promised my brother I'd never let him go hungry again." As Martin led her toward a side door, away from the gawking remnants of the crowd, he couldn't help but feel that some cosmic force had orchestrated this meeting, that the universe had just dealt him a card he never saw coming. Because the last person to wear that exact blue flower pendant had been his daughter, Emily Halberg, on the day of the orphanage fire that had supposedly taken her life. In the ensuing chaos, security guards attempted to remove the rain-soaked girl from the auction hall. Their large hands reached for her small shoulders, but Martin Halberg's voice cut through the commotion like a blade. "Stop. Everyone stand down." His command carried the weight of decades of corporate authority. The guards hesitated, hands suspended midair as Martin approached the trembling child. "This girl is coming with me." Whispers rippled through the remaining guests. Martin Halberg, known in financial circles as the Glacier for his emotionless business decisions, had never shown such immediate interest in anyone, let alone a street urchin who had crashed his exclusive event. "Sir, should we call child services?" asked Jackson, his longtime head of security, a former Marine with a perpetually furrowed brow. Martin's eyes never left the blue pendant around Zoe's neck. No, not yet. In the back of his custom Bentley, Zoe sat with perfect stillness, the empty milk bottle clutched tightly in her small hands. The leather seats probably cost more than she'd ever seen in her life, but she showed no awe, only watchful caution. The car's interior lights illuminated the harsh reality of her condition: hair matted with grime, fingernails rimmed with dirt, and a thin scar running along her left jawline. "Zoe," Martin began, keeping his voice deliberately gentle, "tell me about your brother." Her green eyes studied him, calculating whether he could be trusted. "His name is Noah," she finally answered. "He's 6. He doesn't talk much, but he draws pictures of everything he sees." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "He's been hungry for 3 days. I tried to find food in the dumpsters behind the restaurants, but the rats got there first." Martin's jaw tightened. "And where is your mother?" A shadow passed over Zoe's face. "The white truck took her a long time ago." Her fingers absently traced the blue flower pendant. "She told me to always take care of Noah." "White truck?" Martin pressed. "With the red cross on it." Zoe looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets of Cleveland. She was coughing blood. She said she'd come back. An ambulance, Martin realized. The child's mother had been taken away in an ambulance and never returned. "Where do you and Noah live, Zoe?" "Warehouse 12, she replied without hesitation. "It's not far from yours, it's empty now. No one goes there anymore except us." Martin nodded to Jackson, who immediately provided the driver with directions. As the Bentley glided through the deserted industrial district, Martin couldn't help but notice how Zoe seemed to grow more anxious with each passing block. "He gets scared when I'm gone too long," she explained, clutching the empty bottle tighter. "And it's almost time for his medicine." "Medicine?" Martin's brow furrowed. "What kind of medicine?" Zoe shrugged. "Pills I found at the free clinic. The nice nurse said they help him stay calm when the lights are too bright or when things get too loud in his head." The Bentley slowed to a stop outside a decrepit building with boarded windows and a rusted sign that read, "Cleveland Steel Storage, Warehouse 12. Jackson exited first, scanning the area before opening the door for Martin and Zoe. "Wait," Martin instructed as Zoe prepared to lead them inside. "Jackson will go first." The security chief drew his concealed weapon and entered the dark warehouse. After a tense minute, his voice called out, "Clear, sir, but you should see this." The interior of Warehouse 12 was a stark contrast to the opulent auction Martin had hosted just an hour earlier. Moonlight streamed through holes in the roof, illuminating a space that smelled of mildew and desperation. In one corner, a makeshift shelter had been constructed from shipping pallets and discarded tarps, but it was what covered the walls that made Martin's blood run cold. Drawings, dozens of them, created with what appeared to be charcoal from burnt wood. Most depicted ordinary scenes: birds, trees, people walking. But centered on the largest wall was a detailed rendering of Warehouse 34 engulfed in flames. "Jesus Christ," Jackson whispered. Zoe pushed past them and rushed to a pile of cardboard on the floor. "Noah, I'm back. I brought help." A small figure stirred beneath a tattered blanket. The boy was painfully thin, his eyes too large for his gaunt face. But what shocked Martin most were the angry red marks covering the child's arms and legs. "Rat bites," Zoe explained matter-of-factly. "I try to keep them away, but they come at night when we're sleeping." Jackson stepped back outside to call for a medical team, while Martin knelt beside the boy. Noah didn't speak or make eye contact. Instead, he reached for a piece of charcoal and began drawing on a scrap of cardboard, his small hand moving with surprising precision. "He has autism," Zoe said quietly. "That's what the doctor at the free clinic told me last year. He sees things differently, and he remembers everything." Martin's attention returned to the drawing of the burning warehouse. "Zoe, why did you come to my auction tonight? Of all places?" The girl's expression changed subtly. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her features. I don't know. Noah drew a picture of a man with gray hair who would give us milk. She pointed to a crude drawing half hidden beneath others. It showed a tall figure with silver hair holding what appeared to be a bottle. He's never wrong. Martin felt a chill run down his spine that had nothing to do with the warehouse's dampness. He looked again at the blue flower pendant hanging around Zoe's neck, identical to the one his daughter Emily had worn when she disappeared 20 years ago. The official report stated all children had perished in the fire at St. Anne's Orphanage, which had been housed in what later became Warehouse 34 before Martin purchased and renovated it. But what if the reports were wrong? What if his daughter hadn't died that night? The necklace, Martin said, his voice barely audible. Where did you get it? Zoe's hand moved protectively to the pendant. My mom said it would keep me safe, that it was special. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why do you keep asking about it? Before Martin could answer, Noah made a distressed sound. The boy was pointing frantically at his sister's neck, then at Martin, his eyes wide with what looked like recognition. Sir, Jackson interrupted from the doorway. Medical team is 5 minutes out, and I've taken the liberty of preparing the East Wing guest rooms at your estate. Martin nodded, still watching Noah, who had returned to his drawing, now creating what appeared to be a woman's face with long blonde hair. Zoe, Martin said carefully, would you and Noah like to come stay at my house? Just until we figure things out? There's plenty of food, clean clothes, and no rats. The girl's expression remained guarded. Why would you help us? A valid question, one that Martin himself wasn't entirely sure how to answer. Was it the pendant? The eerie accuracy of Noah's drawings? Or something deeper, a void in his life that had remained unfilled since the night of the fire? Because, he finally said, I think we might be able to help each other. As the medical team arrived and began treating Noah's rat bites, Martin stepped outside into the rain. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. Dr. Winters, I need you to run a DNA test as soon as possible, and with absolute discretion. He paused, watching through the warehouse door as Zoe gently comforted her brother. Yes, I'll explain everything when you arrive. He ended the call and took a deep breath of the cold night air. For the first time in 20 years, Martin Hallberg felt something stir within him, something he had thought long dead. Hope. Dawn broke over Cleveland, painting the skyline in hues of amber and gold. At the Hallberg estate, a sprawling mansion nestled on 5 acres in Shaker Heights, Martin stood at his office window, watching the sunrise with bloodshot eyes. He hadn't slept. How could he, when the past he'd spent 2 decades burying had suddenly resurfaced in the form of a blue flower pendant around a homeless child's neck? The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 6 times. Martin straightened his tie and turned toward the door just as a soft knock sounded. Enter, he called, his voice betraying none of the turmoil churning inside him. Dr. Eleanor Winters stepped into the room. At 58, she had been Martin's personal physician for nearly 15 years. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her piercing gray eyes missed nothing. The children are still sleeping, she reported, placing a medical bag on his desk. The boy, Noah, was severely malnourished and required intravenous fluids. The rat bites were infected, but I've started him on antibiotics. The girl is in better condition, though still underweight. Martin nodded, his expression carefully neutral. And the samples? Dr. Winter's mouth tightened into a thin line. I've collected DNA from both children as well as from you, as requested. The samples have been sent to my private lab with highest priority. We should have results in 48 hours. She paused, studying him. Martin, what is this about? These children should be with social services. Instead of answering, Martin unlocked a drawer in his desk and removed a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a photograph of a smiling 5-year-old girl with blonde hair and green eyes. Around her neck hung a pendant identical to Zoe's. My daughter, he said simply, his voice hardly above a whisper. The day before the fire. Dr. Winters inhaled sharply. You can't possibly think— I don't know what to think, Martin interrupted, snapping the box shut. But I need certainty. Until then, the children stay here. No one can know they're here, Eleanor. No one. Your wife returns from Paris tomorrow, Dr. Winters reminded him. I'm aware. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the distant sound of birds greeting the morning. Dr. Winters sighed and picked up her bag. I'll check on the children again this afternoon, she said, moving toward the door. She paused, her hand on the knob. For what it's worth, Martin, the girl bears no physical resemblance to Emily or Catherine. Martin nodded stiffly, dismissing her. After the door closed, he sank into his leather chair, the weight of 2 decades of grief pressing down on him. Emily had been 5 when the fire claimed her life, or so he'd been told. The official report stated that all 13 children at St. Anne's orphanage had perished in the blaze. Martin had identified what they claimed was Emily's body, though the fire damage had made positive identification nearly impossible. Catherine, his first wife, had never accepted their daughter's death. She'd insisted Emily had survived, that she was out there somewhere. The obsession eventually drove her to suicide 3 years after the fire. And now this pendant, this exact pendant, had reappeared around the neck of a homeless girl who'd shown up at his auction on the anniversary of the tragedy. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Jackson stood in the doorway. Sir, the girl is awake, and she's asking questions. Martin found Zoe in the mansion's vast kitchen, perched on a bar stool at the island counter. She wore clean clothes, a simple t-shirt and jeans that the housekeeper had purchased last night, and her dark hair, now washed, fell in waves past her shoulders. The blue flower pendant still hung around her neck, catching the morning light. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly housekeeper, was preparing breakfast, sliding a plate of pancakes in front of the girl. Zoe stared at the food with wide eyes but didn't touch it. It's okay, Martin said, entering the kitchen. You can eat. Zoe's eyes darted to him, then back to the plate. Slowly, she picked up a fork and took a tiny bite. The moment the pancake touched her tongue, her restraint crumbled. She began eating with the desperate speed of someone who didn't know when their next meal would come. Slow down, Martin cautioned, taking a seat across from her. There's plenty more. Mrs. Peterson placed a glass of milk beside Zoe's plate. The girl froze mid-bite, staring at the white liquid. For Noah, she whispered, pushing the pancakes aside. I need to take this to Noah. Your brother is still sleeping, Martin explained gently. Dr. Winters gave him medicine to help him rest and heal. He's getting everything he needs through an IV right now. Zoe's brow furrowed. What's an IV? It's a small tube that goes into your arm, Mrs. Peterson explained, pantomiming the placement. It gives medicine and food directly into the blood. It helps sick people get better faster. This seemed to satisfy Zoe, who resumed eating, though more slowly now. Martin watched her, noting how her eyes constantly scanned the room, mapping exits, cataloging potential threats. Behavior no child should have mastered. Zoe, he began carefully, I'd like to ask you about that necklace again. Her hand immediately went to the pendant, a protective gesture that seemed reflexive. My mom gave it to me, she repeated, her voice harder now. It's mine. I'm not trying to take it from you, Martin assured her. I just want to know if your mother ever told you where it came from. Zoe studied him, suspicion evident in her young eyes. She said it was magic, that it would protect me. Her fingers traced the blue flower's petals. She said it once belonged to a little girl who was very brave. Martin felt his heart stutter. Did she tell you the girl's name? No. Zoe pushed her empty plate away. Can I see Noah now? Before Martin could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed from the hallway. Jackson appeared in the doorway, his expression tense. Sir, the boy is awake, and he's drawing again. Martin and Zoe followed Jackson up the grand staircase to the East Wing guest room where Noah had been placed. The room, designed for visiting dignitaries, was larger than the entire warehouse the children had called home. The king-sized bed made Noah look even smaller, a fragile figure connected to IV tubes and monitoring equipment. But what caught Martin's attention were the papers scattered across the bedspread. Somehow, the boy had acquired paper and pens and had filled each sheet with detailed drawings. Jesus, Jackson muttered under his breath. One drawing showed a blonde woman pushing a small girl into what appeared to be a closet or armoire. Another depicted a document partially consumed by flames with the words, St. Anne's Orphanage clearly visible. And in the corner, written in elegant cursive, was a single name, Aline. Martin's blood ran cold. Aline was his current wife, his second wife, whom he'd married 12 years after Emily's death. She had been in Paris for the past week, attending charity events and shopping, due to return tomorrow. Noah remembers everything, Zoe said quietly, moving to her brother's side. The boy didn't look up, his small hands continuing to draw with eerie precision. Even things he wasn't supposed to see. Martin carefully picked up the drawing of the document. Zoe, has Noah ever been to St. Anne's Orphanage? She shook her head. No, we've only lived in Warehouse 12 since the white truck took her. Before Martin could ask another question, his phone rang. Dr. Winter's name flashed on the screen. Excuse me, he said, stepping into the hallway to take the call. Eleanor, what is it? The preliminary results are back early, the doctor said, her voice tight. Martin, Zoe is not your daughter. She's not a genetic match to either you or Catherine. Martin closed his eyes, a strange mixture of disappointment and relief washing over him. I see. Thank you, Eleanor. As he ended the call, the sound of the mansion's front door opening echoed through the marble foyer. A woman's voice called out, Martin? Darling, I'm home early. Where are you? Aline had returned from Paris a day ahead of schedule, and somewhere in the East Wing, a little boy with an uncanny memory was drawing her face next to a burning building. Martin froze in the hallway, his mind racing. The sound of Aline's heels clicked across the marble foyer below, echoing through the mansion like a ticking clock. He quickly returned to Noah's room where Zoe sat beside her brother, watching him draw with fierce protectiveness. Jackson, Martin said in a low voice, take the children to the third-floor guest suite. Use the service stairs. No one goes in or out without my authorization. The security chief nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation without needing explanation. Martin gathered Noah's drawings, carefully folding them into his jacket pocket. Zoe, he knelt to meet her eyes. I need you and Noah to go with Jackson for a little while. It's important that you stay very quiet. Can you do that? The girl's eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why? Who's here? Someone who might not understand, Martin replied carefully. I promise I'll explain everything later. Right now, I need you to trust me. Something in his expression must have convinced her, because she nodded and helped Jackson disconnect Noah's IV line. The boy went willingly, clutching his drawing pad to his chest, his eyes darting nervously around the room. Once they were safely heading up the service stairs, Martin straightened his tie and descended to meet his wife. Aline Hallberg stood in the grand foyer, surrounded by designer luggage, her platinum blonde hair perfectly styled despite the transatlantic flight. At 45, she maintained the figure and appearance of someone a decade younger, thanks to rigorous diet, exercise, and the occasional surgical enhancement. Martin, darling, she exclaimed, her arms outstretched for an embrace. The spring collection was absolute rubbish this year, so I decided to come home early and surprise you. Martin forced a smile as he kissed her cheek, inhaling the expensive perfume that always seemed to announce her presence before she entered a room. This is quite the surprise indeed. Aline stepped back, studying his face with shrewd blue eyes. You look terrible. Have you been sleeping? Just business concerns. He deflected smoothly. The Carter merger is proving more complicated than anticipated. She waved a dismissive hand. Well, I'm sure you'll crush them eventually. You always do. Her attention shifted to the luggage. Where is Mrs. Peterson? I brought the most divine truffles from that little shop in Saint-Germain. I believe she's preparing lunch, Martin replied, signaling to the waiting driver to handle the bags. How was Paris otherwise? As Aline launched into a detailed account of her trip, Martin escorted her to the sitting room, his mind elsewhere. The DNA test had confirmed that Zoe wasn't his daughter, yet the coincidence of the blue flower pendant and Noah's drawings of St. Anne's orphanage couldn't be ignored. Somehow these children were connected to Emily's death or disappearance and possibly to Aline. But how? Aline had entered his life 7 years after the orphanage fire. They'd met at a charity gala where she'd been working as an event coordinator. He'd been immediately struck by her beauty and ambition, and they'd married after a whirlwind 6-month courtship. She'd never shown any interest in his past or in Emily's tragedy. In fact, she'd always steered conversations away from his first marriage and the daughter he'd lost. "Martin, are you even listening to me?" Aline's sharp tone cut through his thoughts. "I'm sorry, darling. The merger has me distracted." She sighed dramatically. "I was saying that the Richardsons have invited us to their lake house next weekend. I told them we'd come, of course." "Of course," he echoed automatically. Aline studied him, her head tilted slightly. "Is there something you're not telling me? You seem off." Before he could answer, Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway. "Excuse me, Mr. Halberg. That package you were expecting has arrived. It requires your immediate attention." Martin recognized the coded message they'd established years ago for urgent situations. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I'll be right there." He turned to Aline. "Business never stops, I'm afraid. Why don't you rest from your flight? We'll catch up over dinner." Alone in his office, Martin found Dr. Winters waiting with a thick manila envelope. Her expression was grave. "The full DNA results," she said without preamble, handing him the envelope. "As I mentioned, Zoe is not a genetic match to you or Catherine. However, I ran additional tests based on some concerns about the boy's symptoms." Martin opened the envelope and scanned the report, his financial training allowing him to quickly process the statistical data. "What am I looking at?" "Noah shows signs of prolonged arsenic exposure," Dr. Winters explained. "Low-level poisoning, likely occurring over months or years. It's contributing to his neurological symptoms, though not causing them entirely. He does appear to have autism spectrum disorder as well." Martin's grip tightened on the papers. "Arsenic? How would a homeless child be exposed to arsenic?" "That's what troubled me," Dr. Winters replied. "The most common sources in children are contaminated water, certain foods, or exposure to treated wood products. But the levels and patterns suggest something more deliberate. The implication hung in the air between them." Martin set the report down and moved to the window, staring out at the manicured gardens where he'd once imagined Emily would play. "I want to investigate the pendant," he said finally. "If it truly belonged to Emily, there might be a way to trace its path over the past 20 years. Dr. Winters nodded. "I have a contact at the Cleveland Historical Society who specializes in jewelry authentication. Discreet, trustworthy." "Make the arrangements," Martin instructed. "But the pendant stays with Zoe for now. I don't want to frighten her further." After Dr. Winters left, Martin removed Noah's drawings from his pocket and spread them across his desk. The one depicting the burning orphanage showed remarkable detail for a 6-year-old. The architectural features were accurate, down to the distinctive arched windows of the old building. And the drawing of the blonde woman pushing a child into an armoire, the woman's face was rendered with unmistakable precision. It was Aline. But how could Noah know what Aline looked like? How could he know about St. Anne's orphanage? Unless... Martin's phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Boy asking for paper, drawing non-stop, girl watching door like a sentinel." He texted back, "Give him whatever he needs. Coming soon." As Martin gathered the drawings, his private line rang. It was Bernard Klein, his antiquities expert who had organized last night's auction. "Martin," Klein's gravelly voice came through the speaker. "I've found something about that pendant you inquired about. A blue flower pendant matching your description was sold at a small antiquities market in Pittsburgh 8 years ago. The seller was a woman who claimed it was a family heirloom." Martin's pulse quickened. "Do you have a name?" A description? No name. But the vendor remembers her well. Said she was nervous, kept looking over her shoulder. Mid-40s, dark hair with a distinctive white streak. Claimed she needed cash quickly. A white streak. Martin's mind flashed to Meredith Collins, a former caretaker at St. Anne's Orphanage who had testified at the fire investigation. She'd been the last adult to see the children alive, having left just 30 minutes before the blaze started. Her testimony had been crucial in ruling the fire an accident, a faulty space heater, she'd claimed. Bernard, I need you to send me everything you can find on Meredith Collins, former employee of St. Anne's Orphanage. Of course. Anything else? Martin hesitated, then added, and everything you can find on my wife's activities before we met. After ending the call, Martin stood in silence, the weight of suspicion settling like a stone in his stomach. For 20 years, he'd accepted Emily's death as a tragic accident. Now he wasn't sure what to believe. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Mrs. Peterson entered, her usually composed face betraying concern. Sir, the boy gave me this. She handed him a folded piece of paper. He insisted I bring it to you immediately. Martin unfolded the paper to find another drawing, this one showing Aline with fiery red horns, holding a lighter in front of a burning building. The detail was chilling, down to the malevolent smile on her face. Where is my wife now? Martin asked quietly. In her suite, sir. Resting. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. Please continue to ensure our guests remain undiscovered. Alone again, Martin stared at the drawing, a cold certainty taking root in his mind. The past he'd thought buried was clawing its way to the surface, and at its center was the woman he'd married, the woman who now slept just down the hall, unaware that her carefully constructed world was beginning to unravel. The following morning dawned gray and misty over Cleveland. Martin sat in his Bentley outside what remained of St. Anne's Orphanage, a condemned building on the city's east side that had never been fully demolished after the fire. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the spring breeze, warning trespassers to keep out. The once proud brick facade was now blackened with soot, windows boarded up like blind eyes. 20 years ago, this place had been his daughter's home, a temporary arrangement while he and Catherine worked through their divorce. Emily was supposed to stay just 3 months. The fire happened during week 6. Martin checked his watch. It was 8:15 a.m. Aline was at her weekly tennis lesson, followed by brunch with her socialite friends, a standing appointment that would keep her occupied until early afternoon. The children were secure in the estate's third-floor suite with Jackson standing guard. No one knew Martin was here, not even Dr. Winters. With a deep breath, he exited the car and approached the chain-link fence surrounding the property. The main gate was padlocked, but a section toward the back had been pried open, evidence that others had found their way inside. Urban explorers, homeless seeking shelter, or perhaps someone with more specific intentions. The interior of St. Anne's was a study in decay. Sunlight filtered through holes in the roof, illuminating dust particles that danced in the air like miniature constellations. The main entrance hall was relatively intact, with peeling floral wallpaper still clinging to the walls. Martin moved carefully across debris-strewn floors, his expensive shoes crunching on broken glass and fallen plaster. According to the fire investigation, the blaze had started in the east wing where the children's dormitories were located. Martin made his way in that direction, navigating around a collapsed staircase and through what had once been the dining hall. Water damage had warped the wooden floors, and black mold crept up the walls like malignant ivy. As he entered what remained of the east wing corridor, a noise from one of the rooms made him freeze. He wasn't alone. "Hello?" Martin called out, his voice echoing through the empty building. "Is someone there?" After a moment of silence, a frail voice responded. "Who's asking?" Martin followed the sound to a small office at the end of the hall. Inside, seated in a dust-covered chair, was an elderly woman in a nun's habit. Her face was deeply lined, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but her eyes were sharp and alert. "Sister Margaret?" Martin recognized her instantly, though she'd aged considerably since the investigation. The nun squinted at him, then nodded slowly. "Mr. Halberg, I wondered if you'd ever come back." Martin stepped into the room, taking in the desk where Sister Margaret sat. It was covered with old photographs and documents that she'd apparently been sorting through. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "The diocese is finally selling the property next month," she explained, her voice thin but steady. "I'm retrieving what personal items remain before the demolition crew arrives." She gestured to a cardboard box beside her filled with photographs, rosaries, and what appeared to be children's drawings. "Memories are all that's left of this place now." Martin moved closer, his eyes fixed on the box. "Sister Margaret, I need to ask you about the fire, about what really happened that night." The nun's weathered face revealed nothing, but her hands trembled slightly as she folded them in her lap. "The investigation determined it was an accident, a faulty space heater." "Was it?" Martin pressed, pulling up a chair to sit across from her. "Was it really an accident?" Sister Margaret's eyes darted to the door, as if checking for eavesdroppers in the abandoned building. "Why are you asking these questions now after all this time?" Martin reached into his pocket and removed a photograph of the blue flower pendant, careful not to reveal that Zoe possessed the actual item. "This necklace belonged to my daughter Emily. She was wearing it the day of the fire." The nun's face paled visibly. "Where did you get this?" "That's not important," Martin said firmly. "What's important is that this pendant survived the fire, which means Emily might have survived too." Sister Margaret closed her eyes, her lips moving in what might have been a silent prayer. When she opened them again, there was a deep sorrow in her gaze. "Emily did survive the fire," she whispered. The words hit Martin like a physical blow. For 20 years, he'd lived with the certainty of his daughter's death, had identified a burned body as hers, had mourned, and eventually tried to rebuild his life. Now, with 5 simple words, his entire reality shifted. "What?" he managed, his voice barely audible. Sister Margaret reached for one of the photographs on her desk and handed it to him. It showed a group of children standing in front of St. Anne's with Emily front and center, her blonde hair in pigtails, the blue flower pendant clearly visible around her neck. "Emily was not in her bed when the fire started," Sister Margaret explained, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "She was hiding in the storage closet off the kitchen. It was her favorite place when she was upset. The fire never reached that part of the building." Martin's hands shook as he held the photograph. "Then why was I told she died? Why did I identify a body?" The nun's expression grew troubled. "Because by the time the firefighters found her, she was already gone." "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "A woman came," Sister Margaret said, lowering her voice further. "She arrived before the police, before most of the firefighters. Expensive car, designer clothes. She claimed to be a relative, showed papers, said she would take care of Emily." The nun's eyes filled with tears. "I was treated for smoke inhalation in the ambulance. I saw them leave together, Emily crying, the woman practically dragging her to the car." Martin felt as though the air had been sucked from the room. "This woman, what did she look like?" "Blonde, beautiful, cold eyes," Sister Margaret replied. "I reported it to the police later, but they said all the children had been accounted for among the deceased. No one believed me. They said I was confused from the smoke, traumatized from the event." "Did you get her name?" Martin asked, leaning forward intently. The nun shook her head. "She never gave it to me, but—" She hesitated, then continued reluctantly. "She had been to the orphanage before, 3 times in the week before the fire. Said she was considering adoption, but she only ever asked about one child." "Emily," Martin whispered. Sister Margaret nodded slowly. "She seemed particularly interested in Emily's background, her mother, your divorce. I thought it was normal adoption procedure at the time." Martin stood abruptly, pacing the small office as his mind raced. "The fire investigation. Meredith Collins testified that all children were accounted for in their beds during the final check. Meredith Collins was paid to lie, Sister Margaret said flatly. I overheard her on the phone the day after the fire. She said someone named Aline had transferred the final payment and that she was leaving town. Aline. The name echoed in Martin's head, matching the cursive signature on Noah's drawing. But it couldn't be his Aline. They hadn't met until years after the fire. Unless... Sister, Martin said urgently, do you have any records of the children who were here with Emily? Any photographs, files that survived? The nun gestured to her box. Some. Most records were destroyed in the fire or seized by investigators. Why? Martin pulled out his phone and showed her a picture of Zoe and Noah that Jackson had taken that morning. Do you recognize either of these children? Sister Margaret studied the image, her faded blue eyes narrowing. Then she gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. The boy. His eyes. He looks just like little Isaac Reynolds. He was 3 when the fire happened. She pointed a trembling finger at Zoe. And this girl. She could be Mia Wilson. She was 7, one of the older children. Always looking after the little ones. Martin felt a chill run down his spine. Were they reported among the dead? All children were reported dead, Sister Margaret replied grimly. 13 small coffins, 13 graves. But if Emily survived, she left the implication hanging. Before Martin could respond, his phone vibrated with a text from Jackson. Emergency. Mrs. H found the drawings. Come back now. I have to go, Martin said urgently, rising to his feet. Sister Margaret, is there somewhere I can reach you? I may need to speak with you again. The nun scribbled an address on a scrap of paper. The Sisters of Mercy Retirement Home in Lakewood. Ask for room 217. She gripped his wrist with surprising strength. Find the truth, Mr. Hallberg. Those children deserve justice. As Martin hurried back to his car, his mind was a storm of questions and half-formed theories. If Emily had survived the fire, where was she now? Who had taken her and why? And if Zoe and Noah were actually Mia and Isaac, fellow orphans from St. Anne's, how had they ended up homeless in Cleveland 20 years later? But the most disturbing question pounded in his head with each heartbeat. Could his wife, the woman who had shared his bed for the past 12 years, be responsible for his daughter's disappearance? Martin's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white as he sped back toward his estate, where a confrontation 20 years in the making awaited. Martin's Bentley roared through the gates of his estate, tires squealing against the circular driveway's gravel. He barely waited for the car to stop before throwing open the door and sprinting toward the house. The grand entrance hall, with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier, suddenly felt like a stage set, a beautiful facade hiding 2 decades of lies. Jackson met him at the door, his normally stoic expression betraying genuine concern. Sir, Mrs. Hallberg returned early from tennis. She went looking for you and entered your office. The drawings were on your desk. Where is she now? Martin demanded, his voice low and dangerous. In the East Wing, searching the rooms. She's convinced someone else is in the house. And the children? Secure in the panic room behind the library. I moved them as soon as Mrs. Hallberg began searching the 3rd floor. Martin nodded grimly. Stay with them. No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, do not open that door unless I give you the password directly. As Jackson disappeared toward the library, Martin loosened his tie and headed for the East Wing. His mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, and escape routes. If Aline was indeed connected to Emily's disappearance, to the orphanage fire, to Noah and Zoe's circumstances, then she was far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The woman he had married, shared his home with, slept beside for 12 years, could be a monster wearing a beautiful mask. The sound of slamming doors echoed through the mansion. Martin followed the noise to the guest bedroom where Noah had been staying. Aline stood in the center of the room, her tennis outfit immaculate, her platinum blonde hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail. At first glance, she looked like any wealthy suburban wife returning from a morning of recreation, except for the wild, frantic look in her eyes. Aline, Martin said quietly, standing in the doorway. She whirled around, startled. For a split second, raw panic flashed across her face before she composed herself. "Martin, where have you been? I've been trying to call you." "My phone was off. I had business to attend to." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Business? On a Saturday morning?" She gestured around the room. "Would your business have anything to do with why this room looks recently occupied? Or why there are children's drawings in your office showing me as some kind of monster?" Martin studied his wife carefully, noting the slight tremor in her perfectly manicured hands, the almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of her left eye. Tells he'd learned to recognize over the years when she was lying or under extreme stress. "I think it's time we had a conversation, Aline. A real one for once." Something shifted in her expression, a hardening, a calculation. "About what, darling?" "About St. Anne's orphanage. About the fire 20 years ago." The silence that followed was absolute, heavy with 2 decades of unspoken truths. Aline's face remained perfectly composed, but the color drained from her cheeks, leaving her complexion nearly as pale as her hair. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, her voice brittle. "I never even lived in Cleveland 20 years ago. We met in New York, remember? At the Hammerson Charity Gala. That's the story, isn't it?" Martin took a step into the room. A chance meeting at a charity event. But what if it wasn't chance at all? What if you orchestrated our entire relationship, Aline? What if every moment since has been part of some elaborate plan? She laughed, but the sound was strained, artificial. "Have you lost your mind?" "Martin, I'm worried about you. First these bizarre drawings, now these accusations. Perhaps you should speak with Dr. Winters." "I spoke with Sister Margaret this morning," Martin continued, watching his wife's reaction closely. "The last surviving nun from St. Anne's orphanage." Aline's smile faltered for just a moment. "And what would that have to do with me?" "She told me about a blonde woman who visited the orphanage multiple times before the fire, a woman who took special interest in Emily, a woman who was seen leaving with a child the night of the fire." "Coincidence?" Aline dismissed with a wave of her hand, though her eyes darted briefly toward the door. "Many women are blonde, and survivors of traumatic events often misremember details." Martin reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He pulled up a photograph from their trip to Santorini 3 years ago, Aline on a yacht, smiling at the camera, wearing large sunglasses and a white sundress. Then he opened another image beside it, the enhanced security footage from the orphanage, showing a blonde woman walking through the dormitory hallway. "Facial recognition software has improved remarkably in recent years," he said quietly. "The bone structure, the ear shape, the smile, even accounting for aging, the match probability is over 90%. For a long moment, Aline said nothing. She stared at the phone screen, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. Then, with surprising calm, she walked to the window and looked out over the manicured gardens. "Where are they?" she asked finally. "Who?" "Don't play games, Martin," Aline snapped, turning to face him. "The children, the ones who left those drawings. The ones who recognize me." The admission hung in the air between them. She hadn't denied knowing about children in the house, hadn't questioned who they might be. She knew. "Safe," Martin replied coldly. "Beyond your reach." A strange smile curved Aline's lips. "Nothing is beyond my reach in this house. I've had 12 years to prepare for this moment, Martin. 12 years to secure my position, my future, my legacy. By destroying mine?" Martin stepped closer, anger rising in his chest. "By taking my daughter? By orchestrating a fire that killed innocent children? She wasn't supposed to die," Aline hissed, her composure cracking. "No one was. The fire was meant to be a distraction, to cover Emily's disappearance. Meredith was supposed to get all the children out." The confirmation struck Martin like a physical blow. His suspicions had been correct, but hearing Aline confess sent a wave of nausea through him. This woman, this stranger, had destroyed his family, had stolen his child, had burned down an orphanage, Why? He asked, his voice barely audible. Why Emily? Why any of this? Aline's expression shifted, something like genuine pain flickering across her features. Because she wasn't yours to begin with. Martin stared at her, uncomprehending. What are you talking about? Catherine and I were roommates in college, Aline continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. Best friends until she met you. She knew how I felt about you, but she pursued you anyway. She stole you from me, Martin. We never even met until the charity gala, Martin protested. Aline laughed bitterly. You never noticed me. I was just Catherine's plain friend, always in the background, but I noticed you, I loved you. And when she got pregnant with Emily, I knew that child should have been mine. The revelation was so unexpected, so twisted that Martin could only stare in stunned silence. Aline moved across the room with fluid grace, picking up a framed photograph from the nightstand, one of the few images of Emily that Martin had kept displayed after her presumed death. She looks just like Catherine, doesn't she? Aline mused, stroking the glass with one manicured finger. I hated that. I wanted to erase every trace of Catherine from your life, from your memory. That's why I took Emily that night. That's why I made you think she was dead. Where is she? Martin demanded, his voice breaking. What did you do with my daughter? Aline carefully replaced the photograph on the nightstand. She's gone, Martin. Long gone. I gave her to a family in Europe, paid them very well to raise her as their own, to never reveal the truth. She turned to face him, her expression almost pitying. Did you really think I'd keep her alive as evidence? I'm not stupid. The world seemed to tilt beneath Martin's feet. After the hope that had bloomed with Sister Margaret's revelation, this new horror was almost unbearable. You're lying. Am I? Aline raised an eyebrow. Think about it, Martin. Wouldn't it be crueler to tell you she's been alive all these years just beyond your reach? That while you mourned and built a new life, she grew up calling someone else Daddy? Martin struggled to breathe, his chest constricting with grief and rage. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. Mrs. Peterson found something in the laundry room. Says it's urgent. Come alone. This conversation isn't over, Martin said coldly, backing toward the door. Aline smiled, once again the perfect poised socialite. Of course not, darling. We'll continue over dinner. I'll have Mrs. Peterson prepare something special. As Martin turned to leave, Aline called after him. Oh, and Martin? I'd get rid of those children if I were you. They've seen too much, they remember too much, especially the boy with his drawings. The threat was unmistakable. Martin hurried down the hallway, his mind racing. He needed to get Noah and Zoe away from the estate immediately. He needed evidence against Aline. Most of all, he needed the truth about Emily. Was she truly gone, as Aline claimed, or was there still hope? In the laundry room, Mrs. Peterson was waiting, her weathered face grave. Sir, the girl, Zoe, was in here earlier, hiding. She left this behind. She handed him a small piece of fabric, charred at the edges. Embroidered in faded blue thread was a name. Emily Hallberg. Martin stared at the charred fabric in his hands, the embroidered name Emily Hallberg, bringing a fresh wave of pain and confusion. His fingers traced the delicate blue stitches that Catherine had sewn herself, insisting that all of Emily's belongings be properly labeled before she went to St. Anne's. Where did Zoe get this? He asked Mrs. Peterson, his voice barely above a whisper. The elderly housekeeper shook her head. I don't know, sir. I found her hiding here earlier, clutching it like a treasure. When I asked about it, she ran back upstairs. Martin carefully folded the fabric and placed it in his pocket. Mrs. Peterson, I need your help. Aline cannot be trusted around the children. I need to get them away from the estate immediately. The housekeeper's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded without hesitation. The service entrance through the kitchen. My sister's cottage in Bratenahl. It's isolated on the lake. Perfect. Pack them food, clothes, whatever they'll need for a few days. I'll have Jackson bring them down through the hidden passageway. As Mrs. Peterson hurried to gather supplies, Martin made his way to the library. The panic room, concealed behind a sliding bookshelf, had been installed after a series of high-profile kidnappings in the financial sector 5 years ago. Martin had never imagined he'd use it to protect children from his own wife. He entered the security code and spoke the password, titanium. The bookshelf slid open silently, revealing a small but comfortable room equipped with monitors displaying security feeds from throughout the estate. Jackson stood at attention, while Zoe and Noah sat on a small sofa against the wall. The boy was drawing frantically, page after page of detailed scenes, while his sister watched the monitors with intense focus. "We need to move," Martin announced without preamble. "Zoe, Noah, you're going to stay somewhere safe for a while." Zoe's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Why? What happened?" Martin hesitated, considering how much to reveal to a 10-year-old girl. "My wife isn't who I thought she was. She might try to hurt you." "Because of what Noah remembers," Zoe stated flatly. It wasn't a question. Martin knelt before the sofa to meet her eyes. "Zoe, I need to ask you something important. This piece of fabric," he removed it from his pocket. "Where did you get it?" The girl glanced at her brother, who continued drawing as if unaware of the conversation. "We went back," she admitted. "Last night, while everyone was sleeping. Noah said he needed to show me something at our old place." "Warehouse 12? She nodded. "There's a hidden space beneath the floorboards. That's where we keep our important things. Noah had drawn a picture of that fabric months ago, but I never knew what it meant until we came here." Martin struggled to process this information. How did it get there? How did Noah know about it? Zoe shrugged. "Noah remembers everything he sees. Everything. Even from when he was really little." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Even from before the fire." The implications hit Martin like a thunderbolt. If Noah had been at St. Anne's orphanage as a toddler, if he had survived the fire along with Emily. "We need to go now," Jackson interrupted urgently, pointing to one of the monitors. "Mrs. Hallberg is heading toward the kitchen where Mrs. Peterson is preparing supplies." Martin nodded. "Take them through the tunnel to the garage. My Range Rover has the darkest windows. Use that. Drive them to Mrs. Peterson's sister's cottage in Bracknell. I'll join you as soon as I can." "And if you don't come?" Zoe asked bluntly. The question caught Martin off guard. This child, who had clearly endured more in her short life than most adults, was already calculating survival odds and escape routes. "Then Jackson will make sure you're safe," Martin assured her. "You have my word." As Jackson prepared to lead the children through the hidden passageway that connected to the garage, Martin placed a hand on Zoe's shoulder. "I need to know one more thing. The blue flower pendant, where did your mother really get it?" Zoe's hand instinctively went to the necklace. "She didn't give it to me," she admitted softly. "Noah did. He said it belonged to a girl who escaped, like us." Before Martin could ask more questions, Jackson ushered the children into the passageway. The last thing Martin saw was Noah clutching his drawings to his chest, his solemn eyes meeting Martin's for just a moment, eyes that seemed to hold secrets spanning 2 decades. Once they were safely on their way, Martin returned to his office. He needed evidence against Aline, something concrete that could be taken to the authorities. Accusations of events from 20 years ago wouldn't be enough, especially against someone as wealthy and connected as his wife. Martin unlocked the hidden safe behind his desk, removing a portable hard drive that contained backups of all the estate's security footage. As he connected it to his computer, a soft knock came at the door. "Come in," he called, quickly minimizing the security footage window. Aline entered, now changed from her tennis outfit into an elegant black dress, her hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless. Anyone seeing her would think she was preparing for a charity gala, not navigating the exposure of her decades-long deception. "Darling, I've been thinking about our conversation," she began, her voice honey-sweet. "I may have been dramatic earlier. Stress does that to a person, you know." Martin watched her carefully. "Dramatic? Is that what you call confessing to kidnapping and arson?" Aline laughed lightly, moving toward the bar cart in the corner of the office. "I think we both said things we didn't mean." Marriage is about forgiveness, isn't it? She poured 2 fingers of scotch into crystal tumblers. Besides, it's been 20 years. What would be gained by dredging up the past now? She approached his desk, offering one of the glasses. Martin took it but didn't drink. "Where are the children, Martin?" Aline asked, her smile never wavering. "Safe." Her expression hardened for just a fraction of a second before the pleasant mask returned. "You always did have a soft spot for strays. But really, darling, harboring homeless children, the liability alone is concerning." She sipped her scotch. "Not to mention the wild stories they might tell." "Is that why you poisoned Noah with arsenic?" Martin asked coldly. "To discredit him if he ever told his wild stories?" Aline's composure slipped, genuine surprise flickering across her face. "Arsenic? I don't know what you're talking about." Dr. Winters found evidence of long-term arsenic exposure in Noah's system. Low-level poisoning consistent with someone trying to create symptoms that mimic mental illness or developmental disorders. "And you think Aline broke off, laughing incredulously. "Martin, I hadn't even met these children until you brought them into our home." For the first time, Martin detected what seemed like genuine confusion in his wife's reaction. Was it possible there was more to this story than he understood? Before he could pursue this thread, his phone buzzed with a text from Jackson. "Children secure at cottage, but the boy is agitated. Says he needs to draw one more thing. Says it's important you see it immediately." "Excuse me," Martin said, standing abruptly. "I have business to attend to." Aline's eyes narrowed. "At this hour? On a Saturday?" "The Tokyo markets don't care what day it is in Cleveland." He moved toward the door. "We'll continue this discussion later." "Martin," Aline called after him, her voice suddenly hard. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're doing, stop. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again." The threat hung in the air between them as Martin left the office, his mind racing. If Aline wasn't responsible for Noah's arsenic poisoning, who was? And what was so urgent that Noah needed to draw it immediately? 40 minutes later, Martin pulled up to a quaint lakeside cottage nestled among tall pines. The sun was beginning to set over Lake Erie, casting long shadows across the gravel driveway. Jackson met him at the door, his expression grim. "The boy hasn't stopped drawing since we arrived," he reported. "The girl says he's remembering everything now." Inside, Martin found Zoe and Noah in a small sunroom overlooking the lake. Paper was spread across the floor, covered with detailed drawings that seemed to tell a sequential story. Noah sat in the center, a crayon clutched in his small hand. His focus absolute as he worked on what appeared to be the final image. "He won't let anyone see until it's finished," Zoe explained, her voice hushed with what sounded like reverence. "But he says it's about the woman who took Emily." Martin's heart skipped a beat. "Aline?" Zoe shook her head. "Not her, someone else." Noah suddenly stopped drawing. He looked up, his eyes meeting Martin's with unexpected clarity. Then, without a word, he began arranging the drawings in a specific order on the floor. The story they told was chilling in its detail. Aline holding Emily forcefully in what appeared to be a dormitory room. The blue flower pendant falling to the floor during the struggle. A small figure, presumably Emily, escaping through what looked like a basement or crawl space. And then, most disturbing of all, a new figure entering the scene. A woman with dark hair and a white streak, picking up the fallen pendant. Meredith Collins, the caretaker who had testified about the space heater. The final drawing, the one Noah had just completed, showed Meredith handing a small child, clearly Emily, to another woman whose face was obscured by shadow. In the background was a church steeple that Martin recognized immediately, St. Michael's Catholic Church in neighboring Brecksville. "Noah," Martin said gently, kneeling beside the boy, "did you see this happen? Were you there that night?" Noah didn't answer verbally, but he nodded once, his solemn eyes never leaving Martin's face. "He was hiding in the toy cabinet," Zoe explained. "That's why he survived. I was in the kitchen pantry. We weren't supposed to be out of bed, but Noah wanted cookies." Martin struggled to process this revelation. So Aline didn't take Emily directly. Meredith Collins did. And then she gave Emily to someone else, Zoe added, pointing to the shadowy figure in the final drawing. Noah says he doesn't remember her face, just that she was crying when she took Emily. Martin stared at the drawings, a new theory forming in his mind. If Aline had orchestrated Emily's kidnapping but hadn't taken her directly, if Meredith Collins had been the intermediary, if Emily had been handed off to yet another person. Zoe, he asked carefully, how did you and Noah end up living in that warehouse? You said your mother was taken away in an ambulance, but what about before that? Do you remember anything about your early childhood? The girl's expression grew distant. Not really. Just that Mom always said we had to stay hidden. That bad people were looking for us. Her hand went to the blue flower pendant. And that I should never, ever take this necklace off, because it would keep me safe. Martin's pulse quickened. What if Zoe's mother hadn't given her the pendant at all? What if she had been the crying woman who took Emily from Meredith Collins that night? What if, all these years, Martin's daughter had been living just miles away, under a different name, hidden in plain sight? Zoe, Martin whispered, hardly daring to speak the words. What was your mother's name? The girl hesitated, her brow furrowing. Everyone called her Lisa. But sometimes when she thought I was sleeping, I heard her crying, and she would say a different name. What name? Martin's voice was barely audible. Catherine, Zoe replied. She called herself Catherine. The name hung in the air like a physical presence. Catherine, Martin's first wife, the woman he had mourned alongside his daughter. The woman who had supposedly taken her own life, overcome by grief and guilt after Emily's apparent death. Martin staggered backward, bracing himself against the wall of the cottage. The floor seemed to tilt beneath his feet as 2 decades of accepted truth crumbled. His ex-wife hadn't committed suicide. She had been alive all this time, hiding, protecting these children, perhaps even raising his daughter under a different identity. It can't be, he whispered, more to himself than to Zoe. The girl watched him with those unnervingly perceptive eyes. You knew her, didn't you? My mom. Martin nodded slowly, struggling to find words. If your mother was Catherine, then she was my first wife. Emily's mother. Zoe's expression remained guarded, but something shifted in her posture. A slight leaning forward, an unconscious sign of interest. She had pictures of you, hidden in a book. She would look at them sometimes when she thought we were asleep. What happened to her? Martin asked, his voice cracking with emotion. You said she was taken away in an ambulance? Last winter, Zoe confirmed, her own voice growing softer. She got really sick, coughing a lot. One day she couldn't breathe. Our neighbor called 911. She looked down at her hands. She told me to take care of Noah if she didn't come back, and to keep the necklace safe. Martin's mind raced. If Catherine had been living in Cleveland under a false identity, there would be hospital records. Perhaps she was still alive. Do you remember which hospital they took her to? Zoe shook her head. Just that it had a red cross on the building. We tried to visit, but they wouldn't let us in without an adult. Then one day we went and they said she wasn't there anymore. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I think she died. The clinical detachment with which the child delivered this devastating possibility sent a chill through Martin. How much had these children endured to become so stoic in the face of such profound loss? Sir, Jackson interrupted from the doorway. We have a situation. Mrs. Halberg's car just left the estate. According to the GPS tracker, she's heading east, in this direction. Martin's blood ran cold. How would she know about this place? Mrs. Peterson's sister is listed in the household staff emergency contacts. It wouldn't be difficult for someone to find. Martin turned to Zoe and Noah. We need to move, now. Where? Zoe asked, already gathering Noah's drawings with practiced efficiency. Somewhere Aline would never think to look, Martin replied, an idea forming. Warehouse 34. The irony wasn't lost on him, returning to the very building where this twisted saga had begun. But the massive auction warehouse, now empty after the previous night's event, contained a small apartment that Martin used occasionally when working late. Few people knew of its existence, and the security system was state-of-the-art. As Jackson helped the children into the Range Rover, Martin made 2 quick phone calls. The first was to Bernard Klein, his antiquities expert, requesting an immediate and discreet record search for any patient matching Catherine's description, admitted to Cleveland hospitals during the past winter. The second call was to his attorney, Jonathan Wells. "Jonathan, I need you to prepare an evidence file. I'm sending you security footage, witness testimonies, and documentary evidence of criminal activity spanning 20 years. Martin's voice was cold, precise. "The target is Aline Halberg." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "Martin, are you saying?" "I'm saying my wife orchestrated the St. Anne's orphanage fire, kidnapped my daughter, and has been lying to me for our entire marriage." Martin watched as Jackson secured the children in the back seat. "And I'm going to make her pay." 30 minutes later, they arrived at Warehouse 34 through the service entrance. Martin ushered the children into the elevator that led to the hidden apartment, while Jackson secured the perimeter. The space was sparse but comfortable. A kitchen, living area, bedroom, and office equipped with multiple monitors linked to the warehouse's security system. "You'll be safe here," Martin assured them, showing Zoe how to operate the security locks. "No one can enter without the correct codes." "What if she finds us anyway?" Zoe asked, her practical mind already plotting contingencies. Martin opened a drawer in the office desk, revealing a satellite phone. "This connects directly to Jackson. If anything happens, if anyone tries to enter, you call him immediately." As he helped the children settle in, providing food and fresh clothes from the apartment's supplies, Martin couldn't stop staring at Zoe. Now that the possibility had been raised, he searched her features for any resemblance to Emily, to Catherine, to himself. Her dark hair and green eyes didn't match Emily's blonde hair and blue eyes, but Catherine's mother had been dark-haired. It was possible. "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" Zoe asked bluntly. Martin sighed. "I'm sorry, it's just... If your mother was Catherine and if she rescued Emily from the fire, then... You think I might be Emily?" Zoe finished for him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not." The certainty in her voice surprised him. "How do you know?" "Because Mom used to talk about Emily. She said Emily was special, that she had to be protected at all costs." Zoe fiddled with the blue flower pendant. "This was hers. Mom gave it to me to keep it safe, but it belonged to Emily." Martin's hope deflated, replaced by renewed confusion. "If you're not Emily, and Noah isn't Emily, then where is she?" Zoe exchanged a glance with Noah, who had been silently arranging his drawings on the apartment's coffee table. The boy looked up at Martin and then pointed to one of his drawings, the one showing Meredith Collins handing Emily to the shadowy figure now presumed to be Catherine. "He's trying to tell you something," Zoe interpreted. "About the night of the fire." Noah suddenly rose from his spot on the floor and moved to a blank sheet of paper. With quick, deliberate strokes, he began drawing a new scene. A woman with dark hair, Catherine, holding 2 children by the hands. One was clearly a small boy with Noah's distinctive features. The other was a girl with blonde hair. "That's me and Emily," Zoe explained, watching her brother draw. "Mom took us both that night. She raised us together, like brother and sister." Martin struggled to process this new information. "But you said your name is Zoe, not Emily." "It is Zoe. I've always been Zoe," she confirmed. "Emily was..." She trailed off, looking uncomfortable. Noah continued drawing, adding another figure to the scene, a taller girl with blonde hair standing slightly apart from the others. He drew a crown over her head and stars around her figure. "Emily was special," Zoe repeated softly. "Mom always said she was a princess who needed to be hidden from the wicked queen." The fairy tale language struck Martin as odd. Catherine had been practical, not given to fantasy. Then again, how else would you explain such a traumatic situation to young children? Noah added one final detail to his drawing: a small airplane. He pointed to it, then to the figure of Emily, and made a flying motion with his hand. "She went away," Zoe translated. "About 3 years ago. Mom said it wasn't safe anymore, that they had found us. She sent Emily to live with friends somewhere far away." Martin's heart sank. If Emily had been sent away 3 years ago, the trail would be cold. International, possibly, based on Noah's drawing of an airplane. Finding her would be nearly impossible without more information. "Do you know where?" he asked, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. "Did your mother ever mention names, locations?" Zoe shook her head. "Just that it was across the ocean. Somewhere Emily would be safe." The sound of Martin's phone interrupted them. It was Bernard Klein. "Martin, I found something. A woman matching Catherine's description was admitted to Cleveland Memorial last December with advanced pneumonia and malnutrition. She was registered under the name Lisa Wilson, but her fingerprints were flagged in the system." Martin's pulse quickened. "Flagged? Why?" "Because they matched a cold case from 20 years ago, a suspected suicide victim whose body was never found. Catherine Hallberg. Did she? Martin couldn't bring himself to ask the question. "She survived, Martin. She was transferred to a long-term care facility in February. She's alive." The news hit Martin like a physical force. Catherine was alive. After all these years, all the grief and guilt, his first wife, the mother of his child, was alive and within reach. "Send me the address," he instructed Klein, ending the call. As Martin turned to share the news with the children, a notification appeared on the security monitors. A car had pulled into the warehouse's main entrance. The exterior camera showed a sleek black Mercedes, Aline's car. She had found them. "Stay here," Martin ordered, checking that the apartment's security system was fully activated. "Remember, use the satellite phone if there's any problem." As the elevator doors closed behind him, Martin caught a final glimpse of the children. Noah silently arranging his drawings in some meaningful pattern only he understood, and Zoe standing guard beside her brother, the blue flower pendant gleaming against her shirt, a tangible link to the daughter he had lost and might, against all odds, find again. Sometimes life's most profound truths emerge from the most unexpected places, in this case from the simple plea of a child with an empty milk bottle. Martin Hallberg thought he had lost everything 20 years ago, only to discover that the greatest lies were the ones closest to him, while the greatest truths were hidden in plain sight. What would you do if your entire reality was suddenly revealed to be an elaborate deception? How far would you go to uncover the truth about those you've lost? In a world where appearances so often deceive us, perhaps the most important lesson is that love, real love, leaves traces that even time cannot erase. It survives in memories, in drawings, in blue flower pendants, and in promises kept against impossible odds. Martin's journey reminds us that sometimes we must lose everything we thought was important to rediscover what truly matters. Would you have the courage to tear down the comfortable lies of your life to pursue a painful truth? If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with someone who appreciates stories of redemption and unexpected hope, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful narratives that challenge us to look deeper at the world around us. Remember, sometimes the most important payments in life aren't made with money but with love, truth, and the courage to stand by those promises we make when we say, "I swear I'll pay you back."